Napa Valley, home to some of the greatest wines in the world, and home to Yao Family Wines. Founded by NBA legend and Basketball Hall of Fame inductee Yao Ming, Yao Family Wines are created with hand-selected grapes from some of the finest vineyards in the region. Yao Family Wines are expertly crafted, beautifully complex wines that have critics raving. Yao Ming believes that every shared bottle of great wine becomes a treasured memory of good times with family and friends.
It's relaxing. Of course, fun is part of it, and with family or teammates, friends. Just try to relax down after a stress day.
For Yao, it wasn't enough to just sit and drink someone else's wine. He wanted to see the grapes grow, experience the harvest, and watch the creation of his own wine, to enjoy and share something he made from the field to the glass. Yao Family Wines released its first wine, the 2009 Yao Ming Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, in October 2011.
When you have a winery here, you get into a circle of people who are producing wine or are passionate about wine. So you can exchange a lot of experience of it. And then, of course, it's not only drinking wine, not tasting wine, but also how to make the wine.
To learn more, visit us online today.
Thank you very much for having us on your show. This has always been such a pleasure to introduce the Yao family brand to varying audiences. And it's been such a delight, even though COVID has really affected the industry quite a bit. It's also, I found it very delightful that the industry has adapted to still bring tastings to individuals who are interested, because in this world of hospitality, the main the meat and potatoes of a wine tasting is having the interaction between your wine host and your customer. And with COVID and quarantine, that was all taken away. So it's nice to see this technology allow it to come back. So very grateful for being here. Thank you for inviting Yao Family Wines to be a part of your show. And so what we're going to be going over today are three of our appellation-specific wines from Yao Family Wines. And just to quickly introduce them, it's from our 2017 Oakville District Cabernet Sauvignon, our 2017 Rutherford District Cabernet Sauvignon, and also our 2016 Howell Mountain. There's a lot of people are familiar with Yao Ming, the basketball legend, right? The one who's like towers way, way beyond the screen right here. 7'6" basketball player, NBA Hall of Famer for the Houston Rockets. And a lot of people who would come into the tasting room would always ask, well, how does a a basketball player from China end up with a winery in Napa Valley? And the story was really endearing and very organic because when he was recruited to play for the Houston Rockets, it was still pretty early in his career. He began playing in 2002 for the Rockets. And so he was new to America, new to the language, and just trying to get familiar with the culture. And his personality, as everyone has come to know, is very amenable and a very likable person. So his teammates had really wanted to help him acclimate to the culture, very far away from home and everybody he knew. So they wanted him to be comfortable. And so he, one of his teammates, Dikembe Mutombo, decided to take him out to dinner and start getting him used to American life, which when they were in Houston is Texas, and American life in Texas style is all about eating red meat and going out for a nice big chunk of steak. And so they started going around to steakhouses and enjoying wonderful fine dining. And as a result of that, red wine became part of the meal. And so throughout that friendship and that acclimation process, Yao Ming developed a nice palate for red wine, and he actually liked the Bordeaux style of wine, the little, the food friendly or the softer brand of red Cabernet. So that led to trips to Napa Valley, and familiar story from there is that, coming to Napa Valley, it's very easy to fall in love with the landscape and with the lifestyle. So when Yao Ming would come up to visit, he really began thinking about creating his own brand. It was basketball, legendary basketball player, but that maybe he could have a go in making wine because he had learned a little something about it. He really enjoyed drinking wine, and he also was looking for a way to create a legacy. And he was married and had a young daughter, a young 10-year-old daughter who's probably up here now, but wanted to leave a legacy for the family as well. So in 2009, he made some contacts and actually did it. He launched his Yao Family Wines brand in Napa Valley, and beginning with just 2 bottles at that time. All he started with was the Yao Ming Cabernet Sauvignon and the Yao Ming Family Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. And the 2009 vintage was the very first vintage. And what was immensely rewarding, a big win for us, was that very early on, 2010 vintage, he was awarded 95 points from Robert Parker. And that was a huge win because, number one, Robert Parker is self-described as somewhat skeptical of the celebrity brands. But when he tried Yao Ming's, he was truly impressed. And ever since that introductory vintage, he has been a big fan of our wines. And we continue to score in the mid to high 90s with him, all the way up until, I think the most recent one was the 2016 vintage. So that was a huge one for us. And same story with James Suckling. His scores were very similar to Robert Parker's. And so especially with James Suckling being so ingrained in the local area, that was another huge win for us. So we're a tiny little winery, but we are mighty. We make about 8,000 to 10,000 cases per year. And from the 2 bottles that we started with, the Cabernet and the Family Reserve, we now have branched into 10 different wines in our portfolio. So 3 of them we're going to cover today.
Yeah, that's incredible that he would have won all those awards being so new to the winemaking business.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to his character too, is that, every aspect of Yao Ming's personality, I think, is reflected in everything he has done. The basketball player, competitive, but always gave his best, and he excelled at it. And at the same time, he just is somebody who doesn't make enemies, right? He's a competitive player that people will envy and want to strive to attain that same level. But he is a very friendly, amenable personality, and a personality who gives back to the community. So I think that has a lot to do with what he puts into his brand. And so with his name on the bottle here, and with his reputation of being that stellar kind of character, he's going to go for the best. And so that's been a very rewarding part of being in this organization, is knowing that he has that commitment to excellence just ingrained into who he is. When he had come up in Napa, he was actually seeking to buy a home here in Napa. He was living in Houston at the time, and he was considering some property here in Napa Valley. But during that time, he was also recruited to to head up the Chinese Basketball Association. So he decided to accept that, and he's now the president of the association. So he's coordinating all of the basketball in the entire country. And so that took him back to Shanghai, and he moved his family back to Shanghai. So that's where they're living now.
I know he's done a lot with Charities. Did you want to touch on that now?
Oh yeah, so much. This is a man who is, the more I learned about him, the more I admire and respect him for all that he's able to do. He has attained great celebrity with his name and with his talent, and I love that he's attached it to doing so much for so many. He's some of the organizations we have become a part of over the years is the Asia Society. Many different types of Asian American organizations across the country that are trying to build bridges between the culture of Asia and the US, learning the culture, learning policy, learning business practices, all kinds of things to just be a more cohesive environment. We've become involved with that more recently, with also inviting them to learn the brand and kind of help each other introduce our audiences. But over the years, he's also been a big fan of supporting childhood education. His Yao Foundation, Yao Ming Foundation, has always supported the promotion of having children have access to education. Also Wild Aid, it's a big organization that is designed to protect the population of endangered species like elephants and rhinos and sharks. And he's been very effective with that. For instance, shark fin soup was a very popular delicacy in all of Asia. There's a lot of good luck associated with it, good health, a lot of positive attributes or superstitions were attached to consuming shark fin soup. And so that became a very popular dish, but unknowingly it was depleting the population. And so for Yao Ming to come along with such a high profile, all he had to do was make a commercial and push away the soup. And that brought enough attention to an entire country and woke people up in a sense to say, oh, this isn't a good tradition anymore. And so he was responsible for pretty much reducing the consumption by 80%. So his influence is very, very strong. And what he applies it to is so admirable. But yeah, many other organizations as well. He also with local, he doesn't just support worldwide Wild Aid or education in China. He also is very tuned into our local support here in Napa Valley, being part of Auction Napa Valley. So that also supports a lot of the services to help with providing affordable housing here in the Valley and supporting youth development and ensuring making healthcare more accessible to our locals here. And we also like to do things when we had our tasting room open, just celebrating people who would come to Napa Valley and give their best to the Napa Valley Marathon. So we would have fun with offering free massages after the race was over, give them special recovery treats like power bars, and treat them to a wine tasting as well. So yeah, on every level, from the very, very small, the very local, all the way to the huge efforts. He's a very conscientious fellow, and I love that.
Right now, the tasting room is closed,
Yes.
but you hope to reopen once California reopens again. Is that correct?
Yes, it's been crazy across the entire world, right? And with Napa Valley being that hospitality industry, the heart and soul of it is having people coming in, and the cycle of it being open and closing, and then opening part way again and closing down and coming back open again. So we decided to close the tasting room and focus on the online presence, and how we were talking earlier about the adaptability. It's been very exciting to find other avenues in which we can reach out to customers and actually broaden it in some ways, because I feel very lucky right now to be able to interact with you, whereas in the tasting room, it may not have happened, right? So now we're able to, I guess, en masse, appeal to many more clientele and teach them the joys of the ways of Napa Valley, so that when they are able to come here again, they'll be empowered to know a little bit more about what they're doing and what to expect.
People can buy the wine online, like you said, through your wine club. Are you also in retail outlets?
We are. We have some bottles primarily in the California area, but they are all over the country with some of the larger brands. So we are partners with Costco. We have some of the small liquor shops down in Southern California as well. And yeah, it changes constantly. So I'm not sure I'm entirely on top of every outlet we're in, but you can purchase some of the brands. Many of them are our formerly tasting room exclusive or website exclusive, but our more popular brand, like the Yao Ming Cabernet Sauvignon, that is out in some of the outlets or the retail stores.
For the Chinese, this is the year of the ox.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a special wine, I think, for that, don't you?
Yes, we do. Actually, we started this back in 2017, I believe. We started to commemorate the Lunar New Year. And every year it's a different animal. It's a 12-year cycle. And so this year we have the Year of the Ox, which comes in its own label. It is it's a Happy New Year 2021. And this is a special release for this year. I think it is available as a future right now. You can purchase it online. And then for $99, I think that it will raise after it goes into full production. But that is our New Year bottle for this coming year, the Year of the Ox.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. So who designs the labels?
It's different every year. And this one was designed actually by our current wine club manager, Angela. She's on maternity leave right now, but she did a wonderful job designing this. It's actually, I don't know if you can tell on the camp video, but it's a nice gold foil around the ox. So it's very, very regal. So let's talk about what Oakville is and where. So much about wine here in Napa Valley. Napa Valley is tiny, literally are in a valley. This is Napa Valley. And from top to bottom, it's only about 35 miles. And then at its widest point, it's only about 5 miles across. So it's actually a very, very tiny area that many people are surprised by when they come to visit, because it's such a big name. But packed in this area, there's hundreds of wineries and even more higher level numbers of wine brands that exist with tasting room only or just producers. So the reason why this tiny little area can support that many brands is mainly because of its landscape and topography. There's a lot about wine and its individuality, and it's based on the who and the what and the where and the when about the wine. And the who is the winemakers, all the people who are involved with creating and making decisions to make that bottle of wine, right? And then you have the what is actually, the kind of grape you're actually dealing with. The where is where that vineyard is growing, because depending on where the roots are taking the nutrients from, it's going to vary very much from place to place. And then of course we have the when, which is the actual vintage year. Every year, weather patterns, Mother Nature has her mood, everything is going to change. So when you get that bottle, it is going to be that bottle and it will never be duplicated again. So what we are talking about today are our 3 appellation specific wines. Oakville, which is right here, right in the center part of the valley. Rutherford, which is right above it. And then we have the famous Howell Mountain, which is way up here, literally right in the mountains. And they all have their own personalities because of the soil and because of the weather patterns. In the center is Oakville. And with the weather patterns up here, I've always called this the Goldilocks region, right in the central part of the valley, because up here it gets really, really hot. Down here, you get the breeze from the San Pablo Bay. It's cooler temperatures, but right here in the middle is just right. So what we like to do with the wine sometimes is when you pour a little tasting, it's always nice to have a little bit of a white surface so you can tip it as horizontal as you can get without spilling it. You know, if you've poured a little too much, it's like, oh, boo-hoo, I guess you have to drink a little bit of it so you get the volume down so you don't spill. But if you hold it horizontally against a white sheet of paper, you can better identify the colors and gather information from it. So this Oakville Cabernet, you can see the colors are a little on the garnet side or the deeper brick red. And the translucency, it's got some body to it. It's not a completely transparent light wine. So it's going to have a little bit of staying power on your palate. And because it is in Oakville, Oakville has a soil composition that is well drained. It has some volcanic composition to it, and generally produces wines that are earthier, spicier, a little on the fresher side. And so that's where you get into the what and the when. The composition, by the way, it's a 100% Cabernet.
See the way it in your glass, the looks like viscosity that on the sides. So
Yeah.
what does that tell you about the wine?
Well, those are called legs. If you're in Europe, they call them tiers, but they are an indicator of how much alcohol and how much sugar you're going to be dealing with. So the fun thing about it is that if you swirl the glass, it's always fun to teach this to guests too, because they get so used to learning how to do it. They start doing this with their lemonade and their iced tea, everything. But I'm not sure if you can see. Let's see how this looks. But if you hold your own glass up to the light, you'll see those little drips coming down. And so it tells you it is a viscosity. So when you have a lot of them, depending on the quantity, that's an indicator of how much alcohol is in the wine. So the more legs you have, the higher the alcohol. And then when you can see the speed at which the drips are coming down, slower speed, generally will indicate a higher sugar level. So that's information you can get. It doesn't mean any good or bad. It just tells you what you might be expecting.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to. That's why all of these motions. When you're swirling the glass, you're looking at the color, you're smelling from the bouquet. You're just gathering information, and it's kind of fun when you're getting some friends over your house one day. You do a blind taste testing, and you can kind of try and guess. So this is from our 2017 vintage, and we can talk a little bit about the when as well. The what is Cabernet Sauvignon. The who is our Yao Family Wine winemaking team. The where is in Oakville, and the when is in 2017. And so Napa Valley is the whole reason why we have dates on these bottles, these years, is because it's an indicator of what the weather might have been like, and people can evaluate whether or not they're going to prefer one vintage over the other, depending on what Mother Nature did. And so we were blessed with drought from 2012 through 2016, and grapevines love drought. People not so much, but vines love it. Grapes did. So those provided nearly perfect growing conditions for 5 consecutive years. Well, 2017 got a little wonky on us. And, I love saying that word, wonky. I know
Wonky is a good term because 2017 was a difficult year for wine growers. I know.
it really was. But what I love about the talented winemakers here in Napa, and part of the reason why we are known globally, is just like what we talked about earlier, the adaptability. Right, this is agriculture, and so people who go into this industry are not faint of heart. They know they're going to have some grit to them, because Mother Nature can be really moody, and just want to sprinkle in, a rainstorm, a hailstorm, whenever she feels like it. And so the key to to the talent that's here in Napa Valley is being adaptable and reacting properly to whatever Mother Nature dispenses. So 2017 started off very differently than the previous 5 years that were nearly perfect. 2017 began with a lot of rain. Not a huge problem because that's when the vines are mostly dormant, so they're not affected by it when they're sleeping. But come March, when everything starts to bud, there's all this moisture in the ground and the canopies are ready to explode. So there's a lot of leaf growing, which actually delays a little bit of the bud break because that canopy is kind of shading a lot of the flowering. So there's a lot more maintenance that the vineyard managers have to take care of. But then what happened with 2017 is that then we were greeted with a heat wave. I think in 2017, we had more days that registered over 100 degrees than the past 50 years. So the heat wave was really, really intense. And that brings forth a lot of other issues where the grapes will ripen too quickly or they'll burn. So you have to bring in a lot more water to try and keep the temperature under control. And so when you bring in water, then also that kind of affects the sugar level. So there's all kinds of things that the winemakers have to figure out how to deal with, right? And then at the very end of the harvest season, of course, we were graced with all those horrible fires. And talking about how Napa Valley was affected by the fires is one thing, but not forgetting the devastation that it actually wreaked havoc on people's homes and lives. I know it was a great loss there. That was very tragic all around. But it was, but in speaking of Napa Valley, the vineyards, it happened around October 6th. And fortunately for us, Yao Family Wines, we had, or I think it was the 8th, sometime in early October, we had actually literally just finished our harvest. These wines were October 6th is when the grapes were harvested. And so a lot of fortunately, our grapes were already pressed and they were in the fermentation tanks. And we were fortunate that our tanks never lost power even. So we were virtually unaffected. And a lot of other places, because of the wonkiness of 2017, a lot of people harvested a little bit early because it was just the goofiness with the heat wave had to force things a little bit off time. So it actually turned out well. But what happens with 2017, and it reminds me of 2011, you didn't have an ideal growing season. And so it kind of it separates the men from the boys as far, or the girls from the women as far as.
There you go.
A number of very talented female winemakers here. So it's, when you don't have an ideal vintage year, it doesn't mean you cannot find a fantastic wine because there's so many aspects. It's not just the when or the what, it's the who, right? So the creativity, it is an art as well as being a science. Because of all that wonkiness, you don't have that same lush fruit forward note. You get more of an earthy, spicier note, which is also wonderful. I was a big fan of our 2011, which was exactly like that. Instead of getting all of the bright red fruit notes, you get some of the green pepper and the mushroom. And it's, frankly, if it's a good wine, I think it offers a lot for diversity and having a little bit of variety. And so with this is the same. You're going to have that, you talked about your glands earlier. Well, with this 2017, because of Oakville, the minerals that are in the soil, the volcanic ash, and the drainage, you get a nice balance of tannins and acidity with this. And that's what kind of gives you that little on the sides of the throat, right? The front of your tongue, you'll taste the sweet, and the back, you'll taste the bitter. But the sides are where you're going to get that acid. And the 2017 Oakville, you're going to feel some of that acid. And that is what will help this wine age as well too. So you have the structure of a wine is composed of the tannins it offers as well as the acidity. So this is a wine that you can drink now, but you can also put it away, it will age well. It's easy on the palate, right? And the finish is it's not terribly intrusive, but it's not short either. It has a presence.
I noticed on all these wines, you use the term long tannin structure to describe the wines. So what is a long tannin structure? What does that mean?
Well, tannin is an ingredient that exists both in the grape skin and in the oak barrels. And that is the characteristic of a wine that gives you that dry sensation when you're drinking reds. White wine will not have tannins because there's no grape skin. And well, some wines are oaked, so you might get a little of that effect. But with red wine, the tannins it's just that feeling that dries out your skin. And as red wine ages, those tannins, which are tiny little microscopic elements, they actually are a physical thing floating around in the liquid. And when you drink the red wine right away, those tannins are way too strong. That's all you're going to taste. So that's the reason for aging. It gives them time to calm down in the barrel, as well as gain flavor from the oak. But the time passes, these little tiny microscopic bits of tannins will find each other and they'll link up and become more dense, and they'll literally sink to the bottom and leaves behind a softer, more velvety finish, so that when you are ready to drink the wine, you can actually taste the fruit, because the tannins kind of take a little bit of a not a back seat, but they don't try to hog all the attention at that point.
This is really nice. I'm really enjoying this. I taste spice, vanilla, and some black cherry.
Yeah, there's a little bit, tiny bit of tartness in here. That and I had gotten just the slightest, very slightest notes of fennel and anise, just a tiny little bit. And I think this makes it very compatible with a lot of dishes. Light meats would work well with it. Depends on the spices, but yeah, I find this a very easy wine to drink.
And this one, the Oakville, you produce about 5 barrels.
Yeah, just 112 cases. So all of these appellation specific, very low, very exclusive quantities, not much at all. Howell Mountain being the smallest, we made about 88 cases of that. So that'll go fast. By the way, we call these AVAs just a fancy word for microclimate, and it's how you define a wine growing region that has a specific characteristic regarding the soil and the weather patterns. So we were in Oakville. Now we're just going right directly north of it to Rutherford. And Rutherford is a very popular AVA. It's got a huge following for its Rutherford dust, which Rutherford dust is another romantic way of describing pulverized volcanic ash. So Napa Valley, very old. The mountain ranges, the valley, everything has got so much history and character because of where it's been before. And centuries ago, the valley was completely underwater. And so there's a lot of minerals in the soil from the sea life. And then over the centuries, as the plates shifted and pushed the mountains up and formed volcanoes, that also contributed a whole different element to the soil that also added to the character and complexity to Napa Valley's wines. And so what's really fun and interesting, because Napa Valley, it's beautiful. It's not just about wine here. You can go on hot air balloons. You can go visit petrified forests, right? There's a lot of things to do here. And one of those things is people like to go for hikes. And if you hike up to the top of the mountains, people have come back finding seashells at the top of the mountains. So that's hugely just full of surprises here in the valley. And so the volcanoes, we have Mount St. Helena, which is the tallest mountain in the valley, and also Mount George. There's several volcanoes from centuries past. And when they got mad and exploded and distributed ash, it actually really contributed to the flavor of the grapes that grew here in Napa Valley. And primarily it's Cabernet Sauvignon, but we also grow other varietals as well. And but with the volcanic ash, it contributed a lot to the complexity of the flavor as well as to the drainage. And with that volcanic ash, it doesn't absorb water. And when you combine it with the drought, you have a combination of influences that can create a really bold, very intense flavor in the grape. And that's kind of what Napa Valley is known for. So with the Rutherford, again, this is a 2017 vintage. So you're going to have less of the fruit bomb and more of your earthier notes. But Rutherford, typically right in the mid-valley, you get very temperate climates. You have the volcanic ash along with the red clay soils. That the typical season would produce a fruit plum. This one, you have a little bit of a fresher flavor to it. You still have the berry notes in here. Like I get strong cherry, very balanced with the oak. It's all 100% French oak, 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, aged for about 22 months in first time use barrels. And you can see from the color, it's a deep ruby red with some purple hints to it. But it's also got, it is not translucent at all. There's some boldness to this wine as well. It's got a lot of body to it. And I love this wine because this just feels good on the palate. It's supple, it has a presence, it's got a good weight to it. And for being a relatively young wine, it has a smoothness to it as well. And you still get a little bit of that acid to let you know that it's going to stick around for quite a while too, if you want to age it.
And it tastes quite a bit different than the Oakville, even though the Rutherford and Oakville are right next to each other on your map.
Yeah, that is the characteristic of this region, is like there's so much variety packed into this tiny little area. And in some regions, even row by row will be very, very different when they make the wine from one row of vines as opposed to wine from another row. So that's the beauty of Napa Valley, is there's so much personality. And then as you hang on to the bottle, it just gains even more personality and then later. So it's great fun. This is such an industry that it's delightful to put your toes into it, because when you start walking down it, you just have all of these, it just opens up. There's a whole world of knowledge and experiences that I was surprised by it. I never knew the difference between a Pinot Noir and a Pinot Grigio when I first came to California. I was completely, and all the wines tasted the same. Nothing really, I never took a look at the bottle past the label. That's how I chose my wines. And it was a huge fluke that I had an opportunity to start working in the industry. And once I did, you realize, wow, there's just a wealth of knowledge and disciplines in here. So no matter what you did before, it's there's a lot of chemistry, a lot of science, a lot of agriculture, and also a lot of art and creativity. That's the beauty of being in this area and having so many different producers, a lot of them making Cabernet Sauvignon. But because of their own individual decisions and their own creativity, they're masters of their art. So they bring out their own personality with each bottle. And
you said that you age it in new French oak. Is that true for all the wines, or is some of them used oak and some is new oak, or is it always new French oak?
It is not always. Oak comes from all over the world. You can have oak from, we may have oak here, in the colder climates up in northern Montana. It's American oak, French oak, there's oak from Ukraine, Russian oak, all types, and they all have their own individual imprints. French oak has been revered a little bit more than American oak, just because of the flavors that it produces. And a lot of, I think, the Bordeaux style of wine is also very popular too. So it borrows that from French oak as well. But it doesn't always have to be first time use. When you have new oak, that is in its purest form. It's when it's going to have the really strong flavors. It's going to produce a really tannic wine. And you're going to have that first run with making a really big imprint. But people do reuse oak. Sometimes there's a blend of using a certain percentage of new oak and a certain percentage of used oak. And all of that is aged together and then blended because of the different characteristics each offers. So you have the really strong tannins and the really strong oak flavors from the new, but maybe you want something a little softer. Or sometimes you can even use oak that has been used enough times where it is designated neutral, which means it cannot impart any more flavor or tannins, but wine still may need to sit around for a while and age. And that would be for the port style of wines at that age for a long time. So that's a very good question. It does not always have to be 100% new. Yeah, so many decisions are made, and that even goes back to when they're planting the vines. You know, the new vines, you can't produce wine from them for the first few years. They have to actually bear fruit and go through the cycle a few years before you can actually make wine out of them. So it's a huge investment. So trying to decide where to plant those vines and what to plant in those locations, right? Depending on the soil, the weather patterns you're looking for. And then all the way to when you're going to do certain things to the actual vineyard, when you're going to cut and trim your canopies, when you're going to harvest, and at what time of day sometimes will affect it as well. So there's a multitude of decisions from every level that, you know, I think that by the time it gets into the bottle, which also is another decision, you know, what type of oak are they going to use? How long are they going to age it? How long will fermentation last? When are they going to stop and start fermentation? So all those decisions, right? By the time you get to the bottle, you switch out any one person, is probably going to taste different. So you really treasure how unique this bottle is, and also how many people actually put their heart and soul and decision making into creating this exact bottle for you. But yeah, I'm partial to the Rutherford because I just like the way it feels. There's a little bit of warmth to it. It gives me that fireside feeling. So I like Rutherford, but Oakville has a little more of an edge to it. You know, it's all personal preference. So that's why we call it wine tasting. It's about your taste.
For the third wine, we're leaving the Goldilocks area. Is that right?
We are, and we're also leaving the wonky vintage year. We're going back to 2016. And so this is our 2016 Howell Mountain. And so Napa Valley, here we go. I'll bring the map right back up. Howell Mountain is way up here all by its lonesome, kind of hanging out on the mountainside. And this is a very exclusive, and the reputation of Howell Mountain is it reinforces the Napa Valley, California Cabernet reputation, of which typically the California style of Cabernet is a little bit different than the French style. French Europeans are reputedly liking to pair food with wine, and wine is always about food, right? Eating is a luxury, it's about gathering, so wine is always part of that wonderful ambiance. California came along, and the style of wine that established itself is that very strong, very bold, what I call it, hits you in the face and leaves a mark kind of Cabernet. And Howell Mountain is a region that produces that style. Typically, the grapes there will be very intense in flavor. It's going to have real staying power on your palate and be rugged and show up and say, I'm taking over. So if you want to come here with me, you better step up to, you know, my strength level. And so with Howell Mountain, it is one of those, yes, very strong, very bold wines that actually has a very popular following. So with our 2016, this is, see, I just feel and smell warmth when I take a whiff of this one. So this, I get the dark fruits in here. The more sophisticated, you get a little bit of the blackberry.
Mountain fruit.
Yep, tiny bit of herbaceous. It's just a tiny bit. I'm sipping on it. You see, this feels really velvety on the palate. And that's partly due to it being a 2016. It's a little bit older, so it's had more time to age and soften. This finish, it likes to stick to your palate. It likes to show up and stay a while.
So that's the tannins in the wine that are doing that?
It's the tannins and also the intensity of the actual flavor in the grape. So that's what the beauty of Howell Mountain gives you, because Howell Mountain, literally you're planting on a mountainside. So what does that mean? It means that it is not going to retain water. It's all going to drain down with the gravity. So what does that do to the vine? It makes the vine really dig down deep. The roots are going to start digging down to find the water that it needs, and it still won't be a lot of water, but From that, it's going to have the longer roots to absorb more nutrients from the soil, which adds to more dimension and character in the flavor. And because it is on the slope with very little water, in addition to that, a lot of the soil is volcanic ash, which, like we said earlier, doesn't hold water. So you're talking about a grape that's clinging to a mountainside, that's working hard to dig down to find the nutrients it needs. So the resulting effect is the grapes are tiny. When you have a table grape, there's a lot of water in a table grape. They're huge, right? Because a lot of it is water and juice. Well, with a wine grape, they're much smaller because water is not as desirable. You need a little water, but you don't want a lot. Otherwise, it just blows up and then you're very diluted in flavor. So because of Howell Mountain and because of it being on the slope and not having that water, the clusters are much fewer and they're much smaller. But because those roots are so long, they have all of those nutrients in the plant, they're going to have to be distributed among the grapes that are growing. So that means the tinier amounts and the smaller amounts of grapes are going to be chock full of flavor. And that's what contributes to the intensity of the Howell Mountain fruit.
So as it grows on the mountain, are these harvested by hand? Because no machine could go in there and harvest it, could they?
No, there are machines. I'm not sure which kinds they use on the mountainside, but a lot of the traditions in Napa Valley like to stick with the hand harvest because you can't replace the human eye, right? That's another part of the decision making that goes into the bottle because some clusters are dropped because it may not pass the test. You know, you have sorting machines on the winery end of it, but it all really starts with the harvesting team who are so fast. They go through and they just make their decisions and into the bin, on the floor, in the bin. And they're just fantastic with choosing when to drop. And that happens throughout the growing season too, not just at harvest. They can actually define while it's growing which clusters they should drop before even wasting more time on growing them further.
And this one, you produce 3 barrels.
That was about it. Yeah, we started the Oakville and Rutherford are new additions to our appellation specific wines. Howell Mountain, we started to do a Howell Mountain version back in 2015. And it was always a very, very small quantity and it would disappear quickly.
Yeah, I love the Howell Mountain. I'm thinking steak with this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yeah. Nice porterhouse steak, something, you know, the more tannic the wine, typically, the more fat you want in your food. That's a nice way to kind of balance out the tannins. So this is a 2015 Family Reserve bottle. And this was always the top of the line in the beginning years. And it was what Yao Ming always, we always kind of credited him with this as being his favorite wine. And the funny thing about it is that when you stand it next to a regular bottle, they're both 750 milliliters, but you can see, but the Family Reserve is the one that's been our consistent award winner and the high score since the beginning. Our 2010 Family Reserve is the one that got the 95 and 96 points from the two strictest critics that I feel out there with Robert Parker.
I think Howell might be my new favorite.
Yeah, it has a velvety, I love the feeling of it. It's just, this is a fireside wine for me. So we have 2 different levels of clubs here. One is the Yao Ming Club, and the other one is the Member's Choice. And with both clubs, you would get a 20% discount on your wines. And as a club member, you also get to enjoy all of our Yao Ming merchandise for 20% off. And any shipments of Wine Club wines in either club are flat rate for $20, which is really nice because you can ship a case of wine across the entire country, you know, instead of paying $40 to $60, you're paying $20. So those are the perks of being club members. The 2 different levels that we have, the Yao Ming Club is basically where we decide the wines that you will enjoy. We mail out 6 bottles at a time twice a year. So there's one shipment that comes out in the springtime and one that comes out in the fall, around March and August, I believe. So you'll get a shipment of 6 bottles of our choice, and we'll surprise you with either new releases, tried and true favorites, or maybe even something from the library. So it's always a nice surprise like Christmas when you are part of the Yao Ming Club, right? The other one, if you you know what you like and you like sticking to what you like, then we have the members' choice, where maybe you want to only have Howell Mountain shipped to you. So you can do that in a club and save the 20% and on the shipping and all of those associated benefits. And club membership always gives you some of our, as we're expanding and adapting into this online presence in the virtual life, we're also ramping up some of our corporate events and some of our cultural connections, where we are, like our Lunar New Year celebration is in process right now. We're planning some events for that, and where Yao Ming will have a presence, either speaking or a recorded message, or he'll be part of that. And those are always, whenever we have ever mentioned Yao Ming coming into the tasting room or being part of something, it's instant sellout. So as a wine club member, you get priority tickets and reservations for that. So a lot of nice little perks that are involved with all of that. And plus you get to be part of a brand that is well-loved, well-honored, highly accoladed, and also supports the community on the micro level and macro level by giving back. So to me, all good. So that's our club.
Anna, you've really done a great job of explaining everything. I learned a lot, and we've done a number of these virtual tastings, but you really did a good job of telling us things that we didn't really know before.
To be in a profession where you have the day-to-day, that becomes a little bit rote with every profession, but then you have all this other aspect of the creativity that is it is just such a wonderful, I don't know how else to describe it other than is you understand the passion that people have for wine, and you get why they will go through these wonky growing seasons and have sleepless nights, because in the end, it's all about the gift that you leave in each little bottle. And when you're able to give that to a customer and you leave them with this wonderful set of knowledge or a wonderful memory of their experience, that just self feeds, energizes us to keep going and giving more. So I'm so happy to hear that you learned a lot from this, because I enjoy learning and teaching too.